The kitchen of Sava, one of the city's most acclaimed restaurants, was a symphony of controlled chaos on a Friday night. Steam billowed from pots, knives clicked rhythmically against cutting boards, and orders were called out in a steady cadence that kept the staff moving like dancers in a well-choreographed performance. In the midst of this culinary ballet stood Jamie, a line cook with 3 years at Sava and dreams that extended far beyond its stainless steel counters. Jamie's hands moved with practiced precision as he plated a perfectly seared scallop, his brow furrowed in concentration. He wasn't just cooking. He was creating art, each dish a stepping stone toward the Michelin-starred restaurant he hoped to open someday. Across the kitchen, Alex commanded attention without even trying. As sous chef, he was second in command, but his presence often overshadowed even Chef Marcel's. There was something magnetic about Alex. Perhaps it was the confident way he moved between stations, or how he could taste a sauce and immediately identify the missing element. Or maybe it was simply those piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through everyone. Jamie had been hyper-aware of Alex since the day the sous chef had started at Sava 8 months ago, though he'd done his best to keep their interactions strictly professional. Their relationship was cordial but distant, the kind of workplace dynamic where conversations revolved around prep lists and inventory rather than personal lives. Yet Jamie couldn't deny the flutter in his chest whenever Alex leaned over his station to taste a dish, offering rare words of praise in that low, slightly raspy voice. For his part, Alex remained an enigma, friendly with everyone but close to no one, his life outside the restaurant a mystery that had become the subject of staff speculation during slow afternoons. The tension between them wasn't hostile, far from it. It was the kind of tension that filled the air with electricity, making Jamie fumble with utensils whenever Alex stood too close. It was the kind of tension that made their colleagues exchange knowing glances, even though there was nothing to know. At least, not yet. Let me set the scene for you on this particular Friday night. The restaurant was slammed with a full reservation book and 2 large parties that had arrived without warning. The kitchen was running at maximum capacity, with Chef Marcel barking orders and everyone moving at double speed. Jamie had been on his feet for 10 hours straight, his whites stained with various sauces and his face flushed from the heat of the line. When Alex approached him just after the dinner rush had finally begun to wane, Jamie was rotating stock in the dry storage area, mentally calculating how much prep he'd need to do before he could finally go home. "Chef needs more of the black truffle butter for the special," Alex said, appearing suddenly in the doorway. "We're completely out up front." Jamie nodded, wiping his hands on his apron. "I think we have another batch in the walk-in. I'll grab it." "I'll come with you," Alex offered, surprising Jamie. "We need to check the seafood delivery anyway." 2 birds, 1 stone. The walk-in freezer was a cavernous space at the back of the kitchen, filled with shelves of carefully labeled ingredients and special preparations. It was large enough to store several weeks' worth of supplies for the busy restaurant, with enough room for 2 or 3 people to move around comfortably. As they entered, the temperature dropped dramatically, their breath immediately visible in the cold air. Jamie headed straight for the section where the compound butters were stored, while Alex moved toward the seafood delivery that had arrived earlier that day. What happened next occurred so quickly that neither of them had time to react. A loud crash from the kitchen startled them both, and as they turned toward the sound, the heavy door of the walk-in swung shut with a definitive thud. Jamie rushed to the door, pushing against it, but the familiar resistance told him everything he needed to know. "It's locked, isn't it?" Alex asked, his voice eerily calm. Jamie pushed again, harder this time, but the door didn't budge. The handle must have caught when it closed. He tried not to let panic seep into his voice. "Someone will come looking for us soon." But as the minutes ticked by, the realization dawned on them both. The kitchen was winding down for the night. Chef Marcel had left early for his daughter's school play. The remaining staff would assume they had both gone home after checking the inventory. The cleaning crew wouldn't arrive until much later, and they rarely opened the walk-in. "We could be here for hours," Jamie said, unable to keep the tremor from his voice as he pulled his thin chef's coat tighter around himself. The freezer was kept at a steady 28 degrees, not cold enough to cause immediate danger, but certainly cold enough to become a serious problem over time. Alex assessed their situation with a practiced eye. "Let's take stock of what we have. Any emergency release button?" "Not on the inside," Jamie replied, remembering the safety training he'd received when he first started. There's a release on the outside, but in here, we're relying on someone opening the door. The gravity of their situation began to sink in as the minutes passed. The initial annoyance gave way to genuine concern as the cold began to seep through their clothing. Jamie found himself pacing, partly to stay warm and partly to manage his growing anxiety. "We should conserve our energy," Alex said after watching Jamie's nervous movement. "Body heat is going to be important." He gestured to a relatively clear spot between two shelving units. "Let's sit. We'll be warmer if we're closer together." Jamie hesitated only briefly before joining Alex on the floor. They sat side by side, shoulders touching, the contact sending an entirely different kind of shiver through Jamie's body despite the cold. "So," Alex said, his breath forming a cloud between them, "I guess we finally have time for that conversation we've been avoiding for months." Jamie felt his heart rate quicken, and not from the cold. "What conversation is that?" Alex turned slightly, those blue eyes fixing on Jamie's face. "The one where we acknowledge whatever this is between us." The freezer suddenly felt a few degrees warmer as heat rushed to Jamie's face. Before he could formulate a response, a violent shiver ran through him, his body's protest against the dropping temperature. Without hesitation, Alex shifted closer, wrapping an arm around Jamie's shoulders. "Come here. This isn't just about conversation anymore. It's about survival." The practical necessity of sharing body heat didn't make the intimacy any less affecting. Jamie found himself pressed against Alex's side, acutely aware of every point of contact between them. The professional distance they'd maintained for months had evaporated, replaced by a proximity that made Jamie's heart race despite the cold. As the minutes stretched into an hour, they talked, really talked, for the first time. The conversation flowed more easily than Jamie would have expected, perhaps because the unusual circumstances had stripped away the usual workplace pretenses. "I've wanted to ask," Jamie said, his teeth no longer chattering thanks to their shared warmth. "Why a chef with your experience came to Sava? You could be running your own kitchen by now." Alex was quiet for a moment, and Jamie worried he'd overstepped. But then Alex sighed, his breath creating another cloud in the cold air. I had my own place in Chicago. Small, but it was getting attention. Good reviews, growing reputation." "What happened?" Jamie asked softly. "Life happened. My partner, business and personal, decided he wanted something different. Someone different." Alex's voice held an edge of bitterness that Jamie had never heard before. "He took half the business in the breakup and sold it to a restaurant group that wanted to change everything about the concept. I couldn't bear to stay and watch them dismantle my dream, so I left." Jamie absorbed this information, suddenly understanding the guarded nature that had made Alex such a mystery. "I'm sorry. That must have been devastating." "It was," Alex admitted. "But it taught me something important. In this industry, you have to be careful who you trust with your heart and your future." He looked at Jamie then, his expression softening. "What about you? What's your story?" As the cold continued to press in around them, Jamie found himself opening up about his own dreams. The restaurant he hoped to open someday. The cuisine that would blend his grandmother's traditional recipes with modern techniques. The years of saving every spare dollar toward that goal. He spoke of his fears too. Of failure. Of never being good enough. Of watching others succeed while he remained stuck. "You're better than you give yourself credit for," Alex said when Jamie finished. "I've watched you work. You have instincts that can't be taught." The compliment warmed Jamie more than any shared body heat could have. "You've been watching me?" Alex laughed softly. "More than I should have, probably. It's been distracting." The admission hung in the air between them, fogging the space with their mingled breath. Jamie became intensely aware of how close they were sitting, how Alex's arms still rested comfortably around his shoulders, how their faces were just inches apart. "I've been distracted too," Jamie confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. The temperature in the freezer seemed to drop another few degrees, making them instinctively move closer together. Jamie could feel Alex's heartbeat now, strong and slightly rapid, matching his own. The physical discomfort of their situation was becoming more pronounced, fingers and toes numbing, exposed skin reddening. But Jamie found himself strangely grateful for the circumstances that had forced this connection. "We need to keep moving a little," Alex said after a particularly violent shiver ran through Jamie. "Come on, stand up with me." They rose together, stamping their feet and rubbing their arms. Alex took Jamie's hands between his own, rubbing them briskly to restore circulation. The gesture was practical, but the gentleness behind it made Jamie's breath catch. "Your lips are turning blue," Alex noted with concern, his own face pale from the cold. "So are yours," Jamie replied, unable to look away from those lips now that attention had been drawn to them. Something shifted in Alex's expression, a decision being made, a boundary being crossed. He moved closer, one hand coming up to cup Jamie's cheek. "We need to stay warm," he murmured, but they both knew this was about more than temperature regulation. When their lips met, the contrast was startling, the freezing air around them versus the warmth of their mouths pressing together. Jamie's eyes fluttered closed as he leaned into the kiss, his cold-numbed fingers clutching at Alex's jacket. Between them, their breath fogged the narrow space, a visible manifestation of the heat they were generating together. The kiss deepened, years of professional restraint giving way to something urgent and needy. Alex's hands moved to Jamie's waist, pulling him closer as if trying to eliminate any space between them. For a moment, Jamie forgot about the cold, forgot about being trapped, forgot about everything except the sensation of Alex's mouth on his and the solid warmth of his body. When they finally broke apart, they remained close, foreheads touching, breath mingling in the cold air. "I've wanted to do that since your first day," Alex admitted, his voice rough. "Why didn't you?" Jamie asked, his fingers still gripping Alex's jacket as if afraid to let go. "Professional boundaries. Bad experiences mixing work and relationships. Take your pick." Alex brushed his thumb across Jamie's lower lip. "But being locked in here, facing the possibility of hypothermia, it puts things in perspective." Jamie nodded, understanding completely. Nothing like a near-death experience to clarify what matters. "Are we being dramatic?" Alex asked with a small smile. "I don't think we're actually going to die in here." "Maybe a little dramatic," Jamie conceded, returning the smile. "But the sentiment stands. Life's too short for regrets and what-ifs." They stayed standing, arms wrapped around each other, sharing warmth and occasional kisses as they continued to talk. The conversation flowed between personal revelations and practical concerns about their situation. How long before someone found them? What would happen when they returned to the kitchen tomorrow? Could they really pursue something together while working in the same high-pressure environment? "I'm not going to pretend this wouldn't complicate things," Alex said honestly. "Restaurant relationships are notoriously difficult. The hours, the stress, the hierarchy." "I know," Jamie agreed. "But maybe it's worth the complication." He looked up at Alex, vulnerability plain on his face. "I've never felt this kind of connection with someone who understands the life. Who understands why I stay until midnight perfecting a sauce or wake up at 4 a.m. thinking about menu compositions." Alex's expression softened. "That's exactly it, isn't it? Finding someone who gets it. Who doesn't resent the hours or the obsession." His hand moved to the small of Jamie's back, a gesture both protective and possessive. "I think that might be worth navigating the complications." As they stood there, holding each other against the cold, Jamie felt a sense of peace despite their predicament. Whatever happened when they got out, if they got out, something had fundamentally changed between them. Something that couldn't be undone or ignored once they returned to the heat of the kitchen. The sound of voices outside the freezer door came so suddenly that they both jumped, instinctively putting a few inches of space between them. The handle turned, and light from the kitchen spilled into their cold prison as the night cleaning supervisor stood framed in the doorway, eyes widening at the sight of them. "Holy shit. How long have you two been in here?" he exclaimed, holding the door wide open. Jamie and Alex stumbled out, the warmth of the kitchen hitting them like a physical force after hours in the freezer. They were both shaking, their extremities numb and their faces red from the cold. "A few hours," Alex managed to say through chattering teeth. "The door closed behind us." The supervisor looked horrified. "Jesus, you could have frozen to death." "Let me call someone. Do you need an ambulance?" "No," Jamie said quickly, though his body was painfully beginning to warm up, pins and needles shooting through his fingers and toes. "We kept moving, shared body heat. We'll be okay." "I'm making you both hot tea at least," the supervisor insisted, already moving toward the kitchen's electric kettle. "And you should probably get checked out anyway. Hypothermia is no joke." As they sat at the prep table, hands wrapped around steaming mugs, The reality of their return to the normal world began to sink in. The intensity of their connection in the freezer, had it been real, or just a product of their extreme circumstances? Jamie glanced at Alex, trying to read his expression, suddenly uncertain. But then, under the table, Alex's hand found his, fingers intertwining despite the audience of the cleaning staff. A silent reassurance that whatever had started in that freezer wasn't going to end now that they were out. The next morning, returning to work was surreal. Chef Marcel had been informed of the incident and greeted them with a mixture of concern and irritation. Concern for their well-being, irritation at the potential liability issues. The rest of the staff alternated between genuine worry and good-natured teasing about their ordeal. "So," said Mia, one of the other line cooks, as she chopped herbs beside Jamie, "did you two kill each other? Or did you finally work out all that tension that's been making everyone else uncomfortable for months?" Jamie nearly sliced his finger at her directness. "I don't know what you're talking about," he mumbled, though he could feel heat rising to his face that had nothing to do with the nearby ovens. Mia just laughed. "Sure you don't. That's why you've been stealing glances at the sous chef all morning, and why he keeps finding excuses to check on your station." Jamie couldn't deny it. He and Alex had been circling each other all shift, maintaining professional decorum while exchanging looks loaded with meaning. The memory of their kisses in the freezer kept distracting Jamie from his prep work, making him wonder when they'd have a moment alone to talk about what happened and what would happen next. That moment came during the afternoon lull, when Alex found Jamie in the dry storage area again, inventorying spices. The déjà vu wasn't lost on either of them. "If you're about to suggest we check something in the walk-in, the answer is absolutely not," Jamie said with a smile. Alex laughed, leaning against the doorframe. "No freezers today, I promise." His expression grew more serious. "But we should talk about yesterday." Jamie nodded, setting down his clipboard. "I've been thinking about it all day." "And?" Alex prompted, a hint of vulnerability in his voice that few at the restaurant would ever get to hear. "And I meant what I said in there. About it being worth the complication." Jamie took a step closer. "Unless you're having second thoughts now that we're not facing potential frostbite." Alex closed the distance between them, his hand coming up to rest on Jamie's cheek in a gesture that mirrored their moment in the freezer. "No second thoughts. If anything, I'm more certain now. Seeing you back in your element today, watching you work, it just confirmed everything I was feeling in there." Relief washed over Jamie. "So what do we do? How do we handle this, us, and work?" "Carefully," Alex said. "Professionally. We keep it separate from the kitchen as much as possible. No favoritism, no drama that affects the team." His thumb brushed across Jamie's cheekbone. "But outside these walls, that's where we explore this, see where it goes." "I'd like that," Jamie said softly. "Though I have to warn you, my apartment is tiny and my roommate is nosy." Alex smiled. "My place is small too, but it's just me. And it has a decent kitchen where I could cook for you sometime. Something that doesn't involve 40 other people and ticket times." The thought of Alex cooking just for him, in a quiet apartment away from the chaos of the restaurant, made Jamie's heart race. "I'd like that too." Their moment was interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. They stepped apart just as one of the servers appeared, looking for a particular wine for a customer. The reality of their workplace reasserted itself, but the connection remained, a current running between them that couldn't be switched off. In the weeks that followed, they navigated their new relationship with care. At work, they maintained a professional distance that was only occasionally betrayed by lingering glances or fingers brushing during plate handoffs. After hours, they discovered each other slowly. Jamie learning about Alex's childhood in Michigan and his culinary training in France. Alex discovering Jamie's passion for sustainable cooking and his collection of vintage cookbooks. They cooked for each other on rare shared days off, each meal becoming a form of communication as intimate as any conversation. Alex's techniques revealed his classical training and precision. Jamie's dishes showcased his creativity and willingness to take risks. They critiqued and complimented, pushed and supported, their professional respect deepening alongside their personal connection. There were challenges, of course. The first time they disagreed about a dish during service led to a tense evening and a long conversation afterward about separating work conflicts from their relationship. The whispers and knowing looks from coworkers sometimes made Jamie uncomfortable, though Alex seemed better at ignoring them. And the grueling schedule of restaurant life meant that exhaustion sometimes won out over romance, leaving them too tired to do much more than collapse into bed together. But there were beautiful moments too. Alex surprising Jamie with a rare cookbook he'd mentioned wanting. Jamie bringing Alex coffee exactly the way he liked it before particularly difficult shifts. The night they stayed up until dawn, sketching plans for the restaurant they might open together someday, their individual dreams merging into a shared vision. 3 months after the freezer incident, as they prepared for another dinner service, Jamie found himself watching Alex direct the kitchen staff with his usual quiet authority. He thought about how a random accident had changed the course of their lives, how being locked away from the world had actually opened a door between them. Alex caught his eye across the kitchen and smiled. A small, private expression meant only for Jamie. In that moment, surrounded by the familiar chaos of service about to begin, Jamie felt a certainty settle over him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever complications their relationship might face in the pressure cooker environment of professional kitchens, what they had found together was worth it. Later that night, as they walked home together under a clear sky, Alex took Jamie's hand and squeezed it gently. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I never thought I'd be grateful for getting locked in a freezer." Jamie laughed, leaning into Alex's side. "Me neither. Though maybe we should send the maintenance team a thank you note for that faulty door handle." "Or not," Alex replied with a grin. "I don't think Chef Marcel would appreciate us encouraging more safety hazards." He paused, turning to face Jamie. "But I am grateful. For all of it. Even the cold. Even the near frostbite." Jamie teased. "Even that," Alex confirmed, pulling him closer. "Because it led to this. To us." As they continued their walk home, planning tomorrow's specials and debating cooking techniques, Jamie reflected on how their story had begun, with cold air and fog breath in the space between their lips disappearing. It wasn't the conventional restaurant romance, but then again, nothing about their industry was ever conventional. And as Alex's hand remained firmly in his, Jamie couldn't help but think that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings led to the most beautiful journeys. In the months and years that would follow, they would face all the usual challenges of restaurant life: difficult customers, staff turnover, the constant pressure to innovate and excel. They would argue over menu concepts and management styles. They would support each other through 16-hour days and critics' reviews. And sometimes, on particularly stressful days, they would share a private smile across the kitchen, remembering how it all began in the most unlikely of places: a walk-in freezer where the cold brought them close enough for their breath to fog the glass between their lips. Total _char_count, 18,762.